The crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you're at the ATM and this guy comes up behind you with a knife. He demands that you pull out as much money as you can and give it to him. But you remember that if you just punch in your ATM code backwards, it will still give you cash and it will tell the authorities that you're being robbed. Except that's a myth. And all you end up doing is locking your account, making your attacker that much more suspicious of you. And so what does he do? He gets ready to actually attack you. But what do? You remember that you're a karate master, and so of course you're gonna fight back. And so while you're getting in your stance, he just instantly stabs you. Because disarming someone with a knife is so hard to do, even if you're experienced at it. It's like trying to disarm a child who's got an uncapped marker without getting marker on you. It ain't gonna happen. So now you're stabbed, but you remember, I can just yank this bad boy out and apply pressure and be fine. But that's not true. You bleed to death. These are pretty cool, but it's the plot twist at the end that's gonna get you. You wake up stranded on a deserted island, and now you need to go find drinkable water. So where are some places we can find that? You look around the island and you notice a whole bunch of coconut trees, and you think, well, people drink coconut water, I'll just drink that until I get rescued. Except if you only drink coconut water and don't supplement it with another water source, you will develop wicked diarrhea and will die of dehydration. So you start looking for an alternative source of water. And you remember from that documentary about cannibals that it is safe to drink your own blood. So you cut your arm open, you start drinking your own blood, but what you failed to understand is only in small doses is that okay. Beyond a couple teaspoons, and you'll develop something called hemochromatosis, which results in your lungs filling with fluid, and you basically drown from the inside out. And so realizing the state you're in, you forget that there's an animal on the island that can smell your blood. And it's a land shark. And he rips you to shreds. Crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you get stuck in a blizzard on a mountain, and you need to stay warm. So how are you gonna do that? You remember hearing somewhere that alcohol is supposed to keep you warm. So you whip out your flask, you take a swig, and sure enough, you feel warm already. You feel flush in the face. But it's an illusion because what happens is alcohol, it increases blood flow to the skin and away from your core. So it plummets your core temperature, increasing the odds that you'll get hypothermia and die. So you stop drinking booze and you head off for a cave you see in the distance. Once you get inside the cave, you remember that you know how to make a fire. And so you do. Except the problem with fires inside of caves is it starts to expand the rock above you, causing it to crack and eventually caving in on you. So you narrowly escape the cave-in, only to hear something in the background. A grizzly bear was in the cave with you, and now it's charging out to avoid the cave-in. But you remember, humans can outrun bears, and you start taking off thinking, dumb bear, and it just catches you. Crazy part is, most people believe that these three things will actually save your life. They don't. Let's pretend you're lost in the desert, and you need water, and you don't have any. So where are some places you can get water? One commonly held terrible piece of advice is to drink your own pee, because it's mostly made up of water, except there's 5% of that that's all made up of just waste from your body, and even though the urine might keep you alive a little bit longer, you'll ultimately die of kidney failure. So you don't drink your own pee. Instead, you head over to some cactus you see nearby because you remember reading or hearing in school that you can drink the water inside of cactus. Except, unless it's one really specific kind of cactus, you'll be drinking lots of alkaloids and chemicals that will make you viciously ill, and you'll start vomiting and you'll have diarrhea and you'll die from dehydration much faster. So as you're sitting there wondering what you're going to do next, a venomous snake bites you. And so you instinctively start sucking on the bite to remove the poison, but you can't because it goes right into your bloodstream, and all you'll do is die much faster from infection. This is why you should always take your lockdown drills seriously. In 2017, two 16-year-olds were in their school bathroom when the lights suddenly went out and their school went into lockdown. Feeling rebellious, they decide, you know what, let's go explore the school a little bit first, and then we'll go follow procedure. They step out of the bathroom and look down the hall towards their classroom, and they see this large figure standing in front of their classrooms. It's definitely not a student, it's not a teacher. He's got ragged clothes on, and he starts walking towards them. They dart right back into the bathroom to the corner stall where they hide, praying that that man didn't see them. The man bursts in and starts yanking open all the stalls. Not wanting to see what happens when he gets to their stall, they get on the ground and start crawling to the side of the room where they finally get up and make a run for the door. They look back and he's holding a gun. The boys manage to get away safely and no one's hurt, but the police never capture the ragged man. Sometimes monsters are real. After his parents fell asleep at night, a 9-year-old would sneak downstairs into the kitchen and crush junk food. One night, as he's making his way downstairs, he swears he can hear someone in the kitchen, but his whole family's upstairs asleep. He peeks his head around the corner, and in the kitchen is this skinny man drinking milk straight from the carton with his back turned. The boy's terrified, sprints upstairs, tells his parents, who come right downstairs, they can't find anything. It looks like no one's been in the kitchen. And they ultimately blame their son, and they say, your imagination's just playing tricks on you. The kid knows what he saw, and for the next few days, he felt like everywhere he went in the house, he was being watched. Then one night, he's laying in bed looking at the vent on his ceiling, and he sees a pair of eyes looking down at him. Freaks out, runs to his parents, who come in, look everywhere, find nothing, and blame him again. A couple of weeks go by, and the boy starts to notice a terrible smell coming out of the vent on his ceiling. He convinces his parents to come in and actually cut into the ceiling and go look around, and they find that skinny man, and he's dead. This is why you should be very careful who you talk to online. A 16-year-old girl was home with her mom when she got a disturbing text message from a boy she had recently met on Snapchat. He told her he was right outside of her house, but when she went to look, no one was there. Frightened, she decides to sleep in her mom's room that night, and right before she goes to bed, she gets another text from the boy that just says, "I'm in your house." She shows her mom, who immediately searches the whole house, checks every door, turns on every light. There's no one there. So even though they're creeped out, they go back to bed. The next morning, she gets up and she goes back to her bedroom and immediately feels like she's being watched. She checks in her closet, looks behind her door, there's no one there. Then she noticed that the shoe boxes she normally kept perfectly arranged next to her bed had been moved. So she crouches down to put them back in order, and then out of the corner of her eye, she notices something. The boy who was texting her was under her bed. Believe it or not, this is a well-documented, true story. In 1947, an American ship picked up a horrifying distress signal coming from an unidentified vessel. The first transmission was all officers, including the captain, are dead. The next transmission was the whole crew is dead. The last transmission was I die, and then silence. The Americans trace the signal back to a ship that's drifting off in the middle of the Indian Ocean. They quickly assemble a rescue team who boards the ship. They find the entire crew has perished in the exact same position. They are on their backs with their hands up as if fighting with some unseen force, and they look like this. There was no physical damage to the bodies or to the ship itself. However, even though it was 100 degrees outside, it was 40 degrees on the ship, and the bodies were rapidly decomposing. As soon as they tie up the ship to tow it in, it explodes, and then it sinks. To this day, no one knows what happened inside of that ship. Some say it was a chemical leak, others aren't so sure. This is why you should always be afraid of strangers. In 2014, a disturbing text message conversation between two classmates was uploaded to the internet. Annie and David are talking casually, and then Annie hears footsteps outside and goes to look. She sees someone standing in her yard, and she assumes it's just Dave playing a joke on her, but it's not. Suddenly, the stranger starts sprinting towards her house. He smashes through a window, and now he's in her house. She freaks out, jumps in a closet, and tells Dave to call the police. She tells Dave that he's yelling for her to come out, and then Annie stops texting. When Annie finally writes back that everything's just fine, Dave realizes something. He wasn't talking to Annie anymore. The best things in life are usually a surprise. 9 years ago, my wife and I were asked to adopt a lanky orange kitten with special needs. Although we felt nervous about the challenge, we ultimately agreed to adopt Special Ed. At first, caring for Eddie was totally overwhelming. He had so much energy, but he could barely walk, and so he'd be bouncing off the walls, literally. And so we started to worry about his health. But ultimately, we figured out a solution: pillows, blankets, and baby gates. Over the following 9 years, we moved 6 times, including across the country. We had 2 kids. We added 2 more cats, and through it all, Eddie was there. Then last month, we brought Eddie in for a routine checkup at the vet. And old Eddie was just fine. And in fact, today is Eddie's 9th birthday, and we're so thankful we still have this guy. And I'm so thankful for the 3 million of you guys that are following me. That's insane. So thank you very much. Eddie, say thank you. He says thank you. We love you guys. Take care. This is why you should always lock your crawl space. In 2019, a young woman had just moved into the 2nd floor of an apartment building. She noticed a tiny crawl space that connected all the apartments on the floor, but she wrote it off, citing, "Who'd be small enough to crawl through that?" One night, she walks into her living room, and out on the fire escape is a tiny woman desperately trying to yank open her locked windows. Terrified, she hides behind some furniture until the woman eventually leaves, at which point she runs into a room, grabs her phone, and calls the police. While waiting for the cops to arrive, she hears something above her and she looks up. One of the ceiling tiles had popped up, and the woman from the fire escape is staring down at her. She'd used the crawl space to get up there. The girl screams and the woman scurries away. It took 3 days for the police to finally get the woman out of the crawl space and bring her into custody. Turns out she was on some unknown, extremely hard drug and had totally lost her mind. If you're alone right now, don't watch this video. In the winter of 2018, a man who was living alone in the mountains wakes up to find a red ball sitting on his front yard. He assumed the only neighbor he had must have kids, and so he kicks the ball over the fence, goes inside, doesn't think anything of it. That night, he wakes up to the sound of kids laughing outside of his window. He goes outside to check on them because it's the middle of the night, and there's no kids anywhere, but that red ball is back on his property. So he picks it up, brings it in his house, and goes back to bed. The next morning, he goes over to his neighbor's house to let them know that their kids were out in his yard in the middle of the night. But it turns out his neighbor is just some old man who lives alone, and there aren't any kids anywhere in the area. That night, he wakes up again to the sound of kids on his property, and when he looks outside, there's no kids, but that red ball is back on his property. Panicked, he runs downstairs to make sure the one he brought in is still inside, and it's gone. He checked every window and door, and everything was still locked. It didn't make any sense. He decides to look out the window one more time, and off in the distance is some weird, stiff figure watching him. You're about to watch one of the creepiest videos on the internet. In 2015, two men were driving at night when they spot what looked like a hunched over person in the middle of the road way off in the distance. As they got closer, they started hearing shrieking sounds in the woods all around them, and then they lost sight of the hunched over person. Feeling totally spooked, the guy in the passenger seat starts filming. Despite numerous attempts, this video has never been debunked. If you scare easily, this is not the video for you. In 2001, 4 teens decide to explore an abandoned mansion that locals believed a satanic cult was using to perform sadistic rituals. They go in through a basement window and find a piece of raw meat sitting on the ground with stones around it. It creeps them out, but they keep going. They make it to the first floor, but it's so hot up there they think something's on fire and they run away. The next night, they're feeling brave and decide to go back to the mansion and explore the top floors. They were not ready for what they find.
Cover my bag, alright. What the hell's that? That on the floor. Right there.
Experts believe that the teens stumbled across a satanic cult performing a ritual. Whether you believe this video is real or not, it is undeniably scary. In 2003, guests at a hotel started calling the front desk about a screaming woman on the second floor, so the security guard went to go have a look. As he's making his way upstairs, the dispatcher tells him it's room 209 and no one's checked into that room. When he gets outside room 209, he hears it too. Take a listen. The security guard is visibly shaken, but finally musters the courage to go into the room to investigate, only to come out seconds later with a terrifying report.
John wants you to call the police right now if you don't mind. He says no one's in there, but that all of the furniture's been turned upside down.
No one knows what happened in room 209, and despite numerous investigations, no one's debunked this footage. Over the years, the hotel has had dozens of noise complaints from that room.